There we go.
Speaking of recordings, Johnny, did you ever record the second half of the Freedom program?
The
with Robbie Doe and
the battery ran out and the internet was rubbish. There is a recording of it, but it's not worth watching. It's very poor quality. I'm afraid. Yeah.
Oh, bummer.
Sorry about that. Right. Okay. So we are in Shmuel Aleph chapter 19 now. At the end of chapter 18, we last time we spoke about the comparison between this story and the Rachel, Leah, Lavan, Yaakov story, you'll remember. And that is going to come back a little bit as we go through chapter 19 as well. So let's go straight into the text, get it on the screen for you. There it is. You should have it now. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so Jeffrey's not with us because he is in England. So Avril Links, can you do the reading for us? You'll have to unmute, Avril.
In English.
In English, yes. Start with verse 1.
And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, desired David very much.
Let's just stop there. Okay, so previously, Shaul's intentions towards David to kill him had been very much surreptitious. If you remember, what had happened was that he opportunistically tried to kill him with a spear in last chapter, and he missed. And then he tried to get the Philistines to kill him by giving him a ridiculous task in order to marry his daughter, and that task was to bring him 100 Philistine foreskins. David was up to the task and in fact brought him 200. But the idea was, and if we have a look at chapter 18, I'll just go back one chapter. It was Saul's idea was, here, have a look at verse 17 on the screen, Avril, please.
And Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter Merav, I shall give her to you as a wife, but be a warrior for me and wage the wars of the Lord. For Saul said, let not my hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him.
So when he offered Merav, the idea was that the Philistines would kill him. And then that didn't happen. And then Michal, the other daughter, came along. Have a look at verse 20 and 21, Avril.
And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I shall give her to him, and she will be a snare to him, and the hand of the Philistines will be upon him. And Saul said to David, with one of two shall you be my son-in-law today.
So you can see here, Saul's intentions were to kill David, but to do it in a surreptitious way. Let's now go to our chapter, and we can see, oh wait, there we go. It's out in the open. Read verse 1 again for us, Avril.
And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants to put David to death. But Jonathan, Saul's son, desired David very much.
So at this point now, Shaul has dispensed with any kind of pretense of what's going on. And he's spoken openly to Jonathan and to all his servants to kill David. So it's no longer, is it an attempt to do this surreptitiously in an underhand way. He's now giving a direct order from the king to kill David. Now that's an important fact because Jonathan, Saul's son, is about to defy his father. Now, that's a very serious business, because not only is that a problem from the point of view of Kibud Av V'Ein, his father is the king. And there is a halacha, is there not, of somebody who is mored b'malchut, who rebels against the king, is chayav mita. He is liable for the death penalty. So Jonathan was really sticking his neck out here, literally sticking his neck out here for David. And there's an interesting language here, which those who want to say that this was a homosexual relationship between Jonathan and David, they jump on this language here. Chafetz v'Honatan ben Shaul, Jonathan, the son of Shaul, chafetz, desires. Okay, chafetz means to want. Mi ha'ish hachafetz chayim. Who is the man that wants life, who seeks life? Chafetz means to desire, to want. And they jump on that, saying that this was actually more than just a friendship, and that this was a physical desire as well. Okay, let's carry on. Verse 2.
And Jonathan told David, saying, Saul, my father, seeks to put you to death. And now, beware now in the morning, and you shall remain in secret and hide.
So Jonathan is now acting against his father in a very dangerous way. And he is seeking to protect David. And what has happened here is that Shaul has made a bit of an error here, because he has not realized the relationship between Jonathan and David. And of course, he expects that his son will be loyal to him. And that turns out that that was a big error on the part of Shaul. Now, what you will see as we go through this chapter is that not only is Jonathan very fond of David, in whatever way you wish to think about that, but Michal, his wife, loves David. We have had that in the last chapter. And as I pointed out to you a couple of weeks ago, apart from Rivka, who is said to love her son, Yaakov, Rivka ohevet et Yaakov, there is no mention anywhere else in Tanakh of a woman loving a man other than Michal and David. It's a very unusual thing. So it seems, if we start from this perspective, that everybody loves David. And you'll see, you saw already, when David finished dealing with Goliath, he then went on the rampage and killed a whole bunch of Philistines. And what happened? You remember? The women all came out singing. And that wound Shaul up even more, because they ascribed the death of thousands of Philistines to Shaul and 10,000s to David. And Shaul gets very jealous. Let's just see if we can find that. I think it's in chapter 18. It might have been 17. Let's have a look. I think it might have been 17. So there it is. Verse 6 onwards, Avril, please. Avril's frozen.
And from
oh dear, Avril is frozen. We can't hear Avril, so I'm going to mute her and I will read it. I can't mute her, it's not working because she's frozen. Okay, I'll read it. And it was when David returned from slaying the Philistine, that the women came out of all the cities of Israel to sing, and with musical instruments in their hands, toward King Saul with drums, with joy, and with cymbals. And the cheering women sang out and said, Saul has slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. Saul was very chagrined, and the matter displeased him. And he said, they ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? This is very Shakespearean, as we spoke about. Oh, Avril's back now. This is very Shakespearean. We spoke about Macbeth. We spoke about, I think, Hamlet as well. This is very clear that everybody loves David. Jonathan loves David. The women love David. Michal loves David. And Saul is trying to kill him. And the contrast is very stark. So let's go back to our chapter now. So Jonathan then goes against his father and says to David, he puts him in the picture and he says, you're on the hit list. You need to watch out. You need to hide because father is trying to kill you. Now, there's one strange point here, which needs a little bit of explanation. We've read verse 3. I don't think we have. Verse 3, Avril, please. You're muted. There you go.
And I shall come out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I shall speak on your behalf to my father. And if I see something, I shall tell you.
Okay, so he has told him, hide, remain in secret and hide. And then he says, I'll come out and I'll stand next to my father in the field, close to where you are, and I'll put a good word in for you, and let's see what happens. And if I see something that you know, I think you ought to know, i.e. what his reaction is, I'll tell you. So it's a bit odd, because on the one hand, he tells David to hide away, and on the other hand, he tells him, I'll tell you what Shaul says. So the Radak has an interesting explanation on this. The Radak says that although this was a bit of a risk, that if he was close by when this conversation was going on between Jonathan and Saul, he might get found out. It was very important to Jonathan that David should hear firsthand that Shaul was going to say nice things about him, because Shaul, as we know, was not a stable character. He had this mishagas that came upon him, the Ruach Elokim, the spirit of Hashem that came upon him, which was this psychosis of some description. But in between times, he was reasonably normal and sane. And Jonathan felt that it was a good chance that Shaul would say good things about David, and he wanted David to hear them for himself. Secondly, another explanation is that if he was to hear bad things, in other words, if Shaul was to say, I don't care what you say, Jonathan, I'm going to kill the little so-and-so, then he would be on hand to tell him straight away so that he could run away. And so on the one hand, he wants him to be close. On the other hand, he wants him to stay close by. Right, let's go into verse 4, please.
And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and he said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds are very good towards you.
Keep going.
And he put his life in his hand and slew the Philistines, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel. You saw and you rejoiced. Why then should you sin against innocent blood to put David to death for no reason?
Okay, that's a pretty powerful statement. Remember, he's talking to the king. Granted, it's his father, but even so, you know, to say to the king, what you're doing here is wrong. It's just, it's plain wrong. He's done nothing wrong. You shouldn't be putting him to death. He's innocent. And not only that, you owe him a great deal, because, I mean, this is really harsh what Jonathan is saying, because what he's saying is, verse 5, he put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine, in brackets, not spoken but understood, which was really your job. You were the king. You're the tallest guy around. You should have been doing this, and he did it for you. Now, so it's a very, first of all, the first thing to note is it's very brave of Jonathan to do this. And in fact, Jonathan comes out of this whole story as the hero of the entire story.
He also says that God is behind it as well.
Yes, we're coming to that in a sec, Johnny. Yeah, you're quite right. Jonathan comes out very, very well out of this whole story. He comes out as the obvious hero. Shaul is clearly unhinged, and David is threatened and does what he has to do to survive. But the one person who is willing to sacrifice his own position, remember, by saving David, Jonathan is not only going against his father, he is also handing over the crown to David, because he is the heir to the crown. He, Jonathan, son of Shaul, was first in line to the throne. So it would have suited Jonathan very nicely to have got rid of David, because David was a rival for the crown. So Jonathan here, we need to stop for a moment and wonder and marvel at the bravery and the moral turpitude of Jonathan here. He is a great man. First of all, we know from previous chapters that he was a great warrior. He was the one that was brave to go up the ravine, if you remember, that ravine that Colonel or Major Gilbert used in the First World War. That was Jonathan's path. So not only was he a great warrior, he was brave. He stood up to the king, and he was extremely moral, because he was not prepared to stand aside and see David killed, even though that was actually beneficial to his own career. So Jonathan here is the paradigm of virtue. And we should, and it's very interesting, because there are very few characters in the whole of Tanakh who are undiluted good. There are a few who are undiluted bad, but there are very few who are undiluted good. And Jonathan is one of those. You don't see anything negative about Jonathan really in the entire story and his whole life. So Jonathan really deserves a very high mention for his bravery and his moral stance that he takes here. So he says, and as Johnny just pointed out, Vayas Adonai Teshua Gedola L'chol Yisrael. And Hashem made a great salvation for all of Israel. Why do you think that he mentioned that God made a great salvation rather than David made a salvation or Shaul made a salvation? Why at this point does he bring up God? Any suggestions?
But David always gave credit to Hashem, and he wrote the book of Psalms. Hello.
Okay, all right. So he's taken a leaf out of David's book. Okay, David hasn't written them yet, but fair enough. Okay, any other suggestions?
Maybe he knows he's been anointed already. Somehow he knows this happened.
Okay, possibly. As far as the Pshat is concerned, he's not yet aware of that, but he clearly must know that David's popularity is is a problem for his father. And
I think it's just showing that, saying that David didn't do it on his own. He said because you know what, it was a miracle they killed Goliath, and it was God is a special person to God. This fella.
Yeah, I think that's right, Johnny. I think that what he's implying is that you might want to kill David, but you might want to bear in mind, King Saul, my father, that this must have come from God. So you really want to have a battle with God? Is that what you want? You know, that's you might not just be battling David here. David killed Goliath. He's a lot bigger than you. And he's obviously, as you've said, and maybe this is what Stuart's just said fits in as well. He's got God on his side. You know, you don't want to be messing with this guy. And I think there's a subtle implication there that this Saul, for his own benefit, never mind David's benefit, never mind what's right morally, I think this is a hint to Saul from Jonathan that you might want to think again before you start with David, because clearly God has wrought a great salvation. But there's something else. Cast your mind back to let me see if I can find it. I didn't get this ready. Let me see if I can just find it. Yes, chapter 11. Let me go to chapter 11 of our book, Sefer Shmuel Aleph, chapter 11. There we go. Isn't the internet a wonderful thing? Right, let's have a look over here. This is the battle against the Ammonites. Avril, could you read verses 11 to 13, please?
And it was on the morrow that Saul put the people into 3 contingents, and they came into the midst of the camp during the morning watch, and they smote the Amorites until the heat of the day. And it was that those remaining scattered, and no 2 of them remained together. And the people said to Samuel, whoever says Saul will reign over us, give over the people and let us put them to death. And Saul said, no man shall be put to death on this day, for today the Lord has wrought deliverance in Israel.
Okay, now stop there. Have a look at verse 13 in the Hebrew. Vayomer Shaul, and Shaul says, Lo yumat ish bayom hazeh. No man shall be put to death today. Why? Ki hayom asa Adonai teshua b'Yisrael. Because today God has made a teshua, a salvation, a deliverance in Israel. Okay, keep those words in your mind, and I will flick you back to our chapter. Here we go. And our chapter says, Vayas Adonai teshua gedola l'chol Yisrael. And God has made a great salvation for all Israel. Asa Adonai teshua b'Yisrael in chapter 11. Chapter 19. Can you see the same language? What Jonathan is saying to his father by saying these words, he's reminding him that Shaul himself made a rule that on a day that a great salvation was made by Hashem, there's no such thing as death penalties. He's reminding him of his own statement back at the battle of the Ammonites, that when God does a great salvation, it does not lead to the death penalty, people being put to death. The same language. There was another example which we've had of this idea that when a great day occurs and a great miracle occurs, that nobody is put to death. Can you, any of you remember when that was? I'll just find it while you're thinking. Anybody remember when else we had this idea that we don't put to death on a day of a great salvation? Anyone? Well, it's chapter 14 and it's verse 45. Now I have to give you the background here. Shaul said that nobody was allowed to eat until they had finished the war. Remember that? And Jonathan had not heard this command, and there was a whole load of honey there, and he tasted some of the honey. So a bit like Yiftach, right, when he vowed to kill his daughter, Saul now has got a dilemma, because he said whoever eats on this day will be put to death. And Jonathan, they cast lots to see who it was, and it came out on Jonathan. Verse 42 onwards, please, Avril.
And Saul said, cast lots between me and Jonathan, my son. And Jonathan was taken. And Saul said to Jonathan, tell me, what have you done? And Jonathan told him and said, I but tasted a bit of honey with the end of the staff which is in my hand. Here I am, let me die.
Stop there for a second. Now, that also shows the greatness of Jonathan. He was willing to take the bullet. He didn't know. He could have said, I didn't know, I never heard the command. But he didn't. He said, no, I'm ready to die. The kavod of the king, the honor of the king is really important, and I'm ready to take the bullet. It reminds me actually of a story that I witnessed about certainly more than 25 years ago, maybe 27 years ago, something like that. I was invited to a bar mitzvah in Hale Shul, which for those of you who don't know where that is, it is a posh place in South Manchester. And the rabbi of the shul was Rabbi Joel Portnoy, who was a friend of mine. I was only friendly with the rabbi of the shul, I wasn't friendly with any of the posh people. But anyway, so I was invited to the bar mitzvah. And so Elisheva and I think we had a couple of little nippers at the time, we went down to Hale for the bar mitzvah to stay for Shabbat. And on Friday night, because I was a bit of a Baal Korah, Rabbi Portnoy asked me to listen to the bar mitzvah boy go over his parsha and to, make sure it was okay, kind of thing. Anyway, turns out that it was Erev Rosh Chodesh, and Joel hadn't actually clocked that, and he had taught his son the wrong Haftorah because it was Machar Chodesh. Funnily enough, what we're actually going to be doing now, very shortly, is the story that is in that Haftorah of Machar Chodesh. It's the story of Jonathan and David, exactly what we're learning now. That's not why I'm telling you, it's just coincidence. Anyway, so this kid, Avi Portnoy, has now, on the evening of his bar mitzvah, he's the son of the rabbi, and he does not know this Haftorah because he's never looked at it before. He starts to do his Haftorah for me, and I say, hang on a minute, Avi, it's Machar Chodesh tomorrow. You need to do it. It's a different one. Anyway, so we do our best, and between us, we teach him, and he did an okay job. And this boy said to his father, I'll never forget this, it was so impressive, a 13-year-old boy. He said, I don't want you, said to his father, I don't want you to say in the drosha and what have you, that you taught me the wrong Haftorah. He said, I'd rather they thought I was an idiot and didn't know how to lay the Haftorah properly than they should think that you made a mistake. Really impressive for a 13-year-old boy. He's still an impressive guy. He must be about 40 now. He's still an impressive guy. A really, really nice fellow. If you ever want an optician in Jerusalem, go to Avi Portnoy. So this is the same thing here, really. This reminded me of it. Jonathan here is saying, okay, you made a rule. I'm prepared to take the rap here. I didn't know about it. It wasn't my fault. But I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to take the bullet. But that's not why I've told you that. That was just a by the way. Carry on 44 and 45.
And Saul said, so shall God do, and so shall he continue, for you shall die, Jonathan. And the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan, who has wrought this great salvation in Israel, die? Far be it. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. And the people redeemed Jonathan, and he did not die.
And look at the Hebrew again. Ki, there we go. Ki im Elohim asa hayom. Same language. The word teshua is missing, but it's implied. God has done this day. Again, it says the idea that on the day, again, the people here were reminding Shaul of what he had said over here in chapter 11, that on a day where there's greatness done by Hashem, nobody dies. Chapter 14, the people say, God has done a great thing today. Jonathan cannot die. He's done nothing wrong. And now Jonathan uses it again in our chapter to say, don't do anything to David because God has done this great deed today. So these are all hints that Jonathan are bringing to Saul to give him an option to commute the sentence against David. Interestingly, if we go back to chapter 14, Saul said, okay, Ko Yaseh Elohim. Yes, you're right, Jonathan, you have to die. I mean, I find that odd. If you were a father, you would be looking for any excuse. Even Yiftach tried to make get his way out of it to a degree. He could have done more, but even Yiftach. And Shaul just seems to say, okay, you're on. You're going to die. And it was the people, a people's revolution. Maybe they were demonstrating in the streets on a Motzei Shabbat, I don't know. But they brought about a reversal of the policy against Jonathan on that occasion. So that language there that Johnny pointed out, that Hashem, he brings Hashem's name into it, is as in the brilliant expression of Rabbi Sachs, it's pregnant with meaning. And it's full of interesting implications there. Okay, now we must have caught Shaul on one of his better days, because look at verse number 6, please.
And Saul listened to Jonathan's voice, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he will not be put to death.
Okay, stop there for a second. Now, that is a very important statement. But just one other thing, I just want to go back. There's a couple of things that I missed. I just wanted to go back. So Jonathan says, let not the king sin against his servant David. Can you see the subtle psychology there? Jonathan is describing David not as a rival to Saul, but as a servant to Saul. He's implying that he's not a threat to you. Why do you want to kill him? He's your servant. He's not done anything against you, and his deeds are very good to you. So he says, and then of course he brings in Hashem did it, because he doesn't want to overdo it, because really you don't want to rub Shaul's nose in it. He says, no, this was Hashem's doing. The whole thing was Hashem's doing. But I just wanted to mention that point, that he subtly throws in that David is his servant and he's done good things for him. After all, Dad, when you're feeling unwell, Who is it that makes you feel well when he plays the harp? David. He calms you down. Why do you want to kill him? It's not right. Okay, but this next verse that we've just said now is important. Why is that verse so important? What bit of it is so important? Read it out again for us, Avril.
And Saul listened to Jonathan's voice, and Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. So he's made an oath there, hasn't he?
Yes, he's made an oath. Vayishava. He's made an oath from the word shavua. Now, we know, don't we, that oaths are very important. Just go back to the chapter 14 here, when Saul said, whoever's going to do this, that was an oath. That was a command. Whoever's going to eat on this day, see if I can find it. Pig. Wrong. Here we go. Cursed be the man who eats food today. That's an oath. Here we go. Here it is on verse 24. Verse 24, please.
And the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day, and Saul adjured the people, saying, cursed be the man who will eat food until evening, until I shall be avenged of my enemies. And none of the people tasted any food.
Right, let's have a look at the Hebrew word. Vayoel Shaul et ha'am. It's another word, Allah. Allah. Aleph, Lamed, Hey, I think. It might be Aleph, Lamed, Aleph, I don't know. I think it's Aleph, Lamed, Hey. Anyway, Allah is an oath. It's an oath. So it's another word for an oath. So he made an oath that cursed be the man who will eat food. Cursed be the man means he's going to die. And that's why we came to verse 44 and he said, yeah, I'm sorry, Jonathan, but you've got to die. I made an oath. So it's important in our verse here in 6, that word vayishava. He made an oath. It's not just, oh, I promise you I'm going to do this. No, this is a proper oath. Oaths had a huge, huge importance in ancient Israel. We know the story of Yiftach very well. And Vayishava Shaul. Chai Adonai im yumat. As long as God lives, he will not be put to death. Now, we'll see that Saul's oath in that regard actually does not have very much substance to it, because very shortly he's going to get another Mishagas on him and he's going to try and kill him again. So Chai Hashem is an expression which is just about as strong an oath as you can possibly get. As God lives, he will not be put to death. So in other words, as long as God lives, he will not be put to death, which means forever, as long as God lives. So that you're swearing on God's life, as it were.
Is that word Vaya'al? Has that got God's name in it, Johnny? Vaya'al.
Vayo'el. It's got Aleph Lamed. Yes, probably is. Probably is, Johnny. It probably is.
They say Allah Nakbar or whatever they say.
Allah what is it? Allah Akbar. God is great. Allah Akbar. Yes, Ale is God. Allah is the Arabic for ale. So Vayo'el may well be that the yes, I think you're probably right, Johnny, that the root of that word is an oath on God's name. Yeah, I think you're right. Very good. Very good. So Chai Hashem, which is the equivalent, as God lives, he won't be put to death. That's a very important pasuk. But we'll see that when you are unwell, everything goes out the window. And if anything is a indication for us how we should view people with mental illness, then these chapters about Shaul should be a lesson to us, because he's tormented. You can see he is tormented. He is clearly not well. It's very easy for us to say Shaul was bad and Shaul did this and Shaul did that, but he was clearly a sick man. And we'll see what happens now, bearing in mind that he has now sworn on God's life that he will not put David to death. Let's go on.
And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was before him as yesterday and before.
Okay,
and
let's stop there. Let's stop there. So everything has calmed down. Okay, he calms down, and he is ke'etmol shilshom. This expression here is a common, not common, but it's a expression that appears a few times in Tanakh. Ke'etmol shilshom. Etmol is yesterday. Shilshom is the day before yesterday. I think we've had this word before and we've had a little explanation. What word can you see in the middle of there? Shilshom.
3 days before.
Yeah, that's right. Shalosh, 3. So today is 1 day. The day before yesterday is 2 days. And the day before yesterday is 3 days. If you count today, 3 days ago is Shilshom. So that's why the word Shilshom means the day before yesterday. So what it means
and
here,
where is this expression first found in Tanakh?
where is this expression first? I think, you're putting me on the spot here, but I think it is again in the Lavan Yaakov story. Am I right? You
are right.
Give me a quote and I'll get it up on the screen. It'll be in Bereshit 30 something, I'm guessing.
Kitmol Shilshom.
Yeah, where is it?
Vayetze, I think in Shishi of Vayetze.
Right, I think it'll be in chapter 30 something of Bereshit. Let's see if I can find it. That's right. And who says it? It is Rachel and Leah. I don't know which one says it to which off the top of my head. One of them says, our father is not behaving to us in the same way as he did Ke'etmol Shilshom.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find it. Here's chapter 30. No, might be 31. It's definitely around here somewhere. Here we go. Found it. Here we go. So you read it for us, Avril. Verse 4.
So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field to his flocks. And he said to them, I see your father's countenance, that he is not disposed towards me as he was yesterday and the day before, and the God of my father was with me.
There we go. His face was not to me kitmol shilshom, as it was yesterday and the day before. That is correct. So there we go. Another comparison between the two stories. So let's go back to where we are. And this is the opposite. David was brought back to Saul, and everything was as it was yesterday and the day before, which means David was back in the court, playing the harp when necessary, and also being Shaul's general for the army. But as we can see, it's all very short-lived. This is the calm before the storm. Verse 8.
He doesn't apologize to him, does he? And say, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean what you're hearing.
No, not. We're not told that. No. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he didn't. No. But I think you're right. He probably didn't. I don't think kings are, generally speaking, do much in the way of apology, generally speaking, in those days. But he may have done, but I think it's unlikely. I think you're right.
And there was war again, and David went out and battled the Philistines and dealt a great blow upon them, and they fled from before him. And
let's stop there. So there's another war. and David goes out and he is successful again. What is that going to do to Shaul?
Makes him jealous.
It's going to make him jealous again, isn't it? On the one hand, he's grateful to him because he's saved his kingdom again. There's been a war and he's won it. But on the other hand, we already know, don't we, from chapter 11, that he's jealous of David's success as a soldier. The ladies ascribed 10,000s to David and only 1,000 to Shaul, and he did not like it. So yes, this is going to cause Shaul to be jealous again. And what happens? Verse 9.
And an evil spirit from the Lord was upon Saul, and he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing with his hand. And Saul attempted to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from before Saul, and Saul drove the spear into the wall, but David fled and escaped on that night.
Okay, let's stop there. So I don't think it's a coincidence that this evil spirit came upon Saul at this stage. There's been another war. David's been successful. And this jealousy that we've just mentioned, I think, is the trigger for this psychosis that comes upon Saul. It's described as Ruach Ra'ah, Ruach Hashem Ra'ah, an evil spirit from Hashem. That's a description that we've heard many times. Those of you who have ever suffered from or known anybody that's suffered from a mental illness, that's how it appears. It just is like an evil spirit. Churchill, of course, described it as his black dog that used to come.
Yeah.
On top of him.
Isn't it? But this is Shem's cause. This is the problem I have with this, Johnny. It's Hashem who's caused, seems to be causing it. So it seems that he's not going to be able to. He can't control it because Hashem presumably wants him to be overtaken by these thoughts and these feelings and this spirit, because Hashem has caused it.
So I think that's an interesting idea. And I suppose since we're coming up to Pesach, we could bring in the concept of Pharaoh having his heart hardened. And you know, that doesn't seem fair either, does it really? God's caused him to harden his heart and not let the people go, and then he gets punished for it. Doesn't seem fair, that. And you know, there have been volumes and volumes of works written on that particular point about free choice, etc. But I certainly understand your difficulty with that. Ruach Ra'ah from Hashem, an evil spirit from Hashem was upon Saul. You could understand that saying, well, Hashem deliberately made him do that. Or you could say that this, you know, was part of his mental illness, and that was what he had to contend with. And you could argue, I suppose, and it would be right to say that, I mean, you're a legal expert, Avril. There are many defenses that are mounted on the basis of insanity, temporary insanity, not being in control of one's faculties at the time when something happens. And that's correct that there should be such a thing, because what's happening here, when this evil spirit comes upon Shaul, that he's not in control of his own faculties. And I think that what you're saying fits in with that, really, that he's ill. Now, the illness is described as an evil spirit from Hashem. I suppose probably because of my training, I look at this as an illness, whereas others may look at it as a spiritual malady. And certainly, and of course, it says the word spirit. Ruach is spirit. So I suppose it depends how you look at it. But either way, I think it's fair to say that Shaul has mitigating circumstances here. He's either
the point of view, it's almost like he's being used as a tool because he's not in control. So Hashem is using him as a tool to sort of provoke and to create all these problems with David. That's what I was really thinking of.
Okay, so
that's as well as that.
That's an interesting idea, because that's something that is brought down very strongly with the Romans and the Assyrians. I should say the Assyrians and the Romans in that order, when they destroyed Jerusalem in 586 BCE and 70 CE, respectively, the destruction of the temples. They are described by the rabbis as the Makel Hashem, as the rod of Hashem. In other words, Hashem is using them to do his job, i.e., at that time, the Israelites were deserving of punishment. The temple was deserving to be destroyed, and they were deserving of exile. And it just happened to be that the Assyrians, Babylonians, Romans, whoever they happened to be at the time, they were used as the rod of Hashem. And I think that's what you're saying, isn't it? That here, Saul is really just an instrument being used by God to carry out what God wanted to happen. It's a bit difficult to square that in a way, because with the Babylonians and the Romans, the end result was what seemed to be intended, and that was the destruction of the temple and exile. In other words, the Babylonians and the Romans were successful in their task that Hashem set them, as it were, if you look at it that way. Hashem said, they may not have known it, but as it were, Hashem said, right, go and destroy the temple and exile the Jews. So they did. Here, Saul is not successful, because we know the end of the story, don't we? David does become king of Israel. So if God has chosen Saul to do a job, he hasn't chosen right, because he doesn't do the job. So
he does, he provokes him. The idea is not, I mean, I get the impression the idea is he doesn't want it. He wants, it's the provocation and the harassment. That's what he wants.
Because he wants David to be harassed.
Yes, yeah, because that's what he's going to do to his character for the future. That was what I was thinking.
That's a very interesting approach. I've not thought of that before. So what Avril is saying is that this was the equivalent of having to go through all of those things that you go through in boarding school to build up your character. I remember seeing in that ridiculous program, The Crown, when Prince Charles was at Gordonstoun, and they made him do all these character building trials, and he had to go cross-country running in the wet, and he didn't like it and all that. So I don't know how accurate it was, but all to build up his character. So what you're saying, Avril, is that this was God's way of building up David's strength for what he will need later on in life. And Saul's attempt to kill him and to get rid of him is the method through which God used to build David's character. That's what you're saying. Yeah. I like it. I think that's very good. I like it a lot. That could go in Chidushay Poleg. Okay. Right. Okay. So the evil spirit from Hashem is upon Saul for whatever reason. And he has another go at trying to pin David to the wall. This is his second attempt. He wouldn't do very well on the golden shot, would he? Remember that? The golden shot, Bob Monkhouse. I'm showing my age now. So anyway, he misses again. But remember, the first time, it was all sort of very spontaneous, and David doesn't run away. He just manages to dodge it. This time, he's not making the same mistake a third time. He now, the first time he might have thought, he's just having a bit of a bad day. I'm not going to run away. It's just, it'll be okay. He's just had somebody's wound him up and he's tried to throw this spear. He wasn't really attempting to kill me. It was this, that, and the other. David now knows that there's there's only one reason why he's trying to throw the spear at him, and that's to kill him. So he flees and he escapes on that night. And we will stop there as a cliffhanger to see whether he's going to get away or not. This is the end of the Batman things that you used to have on the Batman comic things. Wait and see next exciting episode, same time, same channel. So we will see next week, please God, what happens and how Michal, David's wife, is very important in the escape that David is going to make. Any questions about today's shiur? I'll just recap what we said. We said that Jonathan took his life in his hands, in fact, and challenged his father and said that he shouldn't kill David. And he describes him as his servant. He brings in Shua Hashem so that he doesn't get put to death. And Saul temporarily gives in and says and makes an oath that Hashem will, as Hashem lives, he won't be put to death. But it doesn't last very long, and he tries to kill him with a spear. And we saw the connection again between the Lavan and Yaakov story with this expression etmol shilshom. Any comments or questions?
Yeah, going back to chapter 18, when you went through and you were talking about Michal going to Saul to say that she loved David, it actually says in that particular chapter that they both effectively went to Saul. So the implication was that David loved Michal, even though it doesn't say so. And you've in the past said that David never said he loved Michal, but that particular verse implies that he did.
All right, well, let me see if I can find that verse. It's chapter 18 is on the screen for you now. Okay. Here we go. This was Merav. Merav was given to somebody else. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David. And they told Saul, and the thing pleased him.
And it says, and they told Saul, which implies that David loved Michal.
So you are a very modern man, Michael, and you are suggesting that Michal and David themselves went to Saul and said, we would like to get married.
Yep.
I don't read it like that. Vayagidu l'Shaul, and they told Saul. I read that as his courtiers told Saul. He was told, it came to his notice. I mean, you might be right. I didn't read it that way. I read it that it became known to Saul. You're right, it does say Vayagidu, and they told Saul. And I suppose you could argue quite strongly that the subject of that would be certainly Michal and maybe David. I can see where you're coming from. I think it's a bit tenuous, but maybe you're right. But it certainly doesn't say it explicitly. And David says over here that he doesn't say that I want to marry Michal. He says, I want to become the king's son-in-law. Mm-hmm. It seems the language is that David, here we go, look at verse 26. And his servants told David these words, and the thing pleased David to become the king's son-in-law. If he loved Michal, you would expect that to say, and the thing pleased David to marry Michal because she was the love of his life. Actually, what he wants to do is to become the king's son-in-law. So I can't say to you that you're wrong, because it could well be that that's an implication of that verse Vayagidu over here, the Shaul, but it's not the way I read it. And I think, as you will go on, if you have read on, I don't know if you've read on, Michael, but as we get, okay, good, but I'll just give you a bit of a spoiler. As we go on, you will see that David's behavior towards Michal is not entirely exemplary. And so I think that there is some support for the opposite view, that David was more interested in being the king's son-in-law than he was in marrying Michal. But I can't say to you you're wrong. I'm just not completely convinced.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we will leave it there, and I'll see you all Monday, Tefillah, which will be at the earlier time of 7 o'clock, and a Wednesday for the Gemara share.
Okay, thank you.
Hope to see you in the flesh on Wednesday.
Oh, good. Safe trip. Safe trip.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shavua tov.
Shavua tov, everybody.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. Yom tov.
Bye-bye.